Welcome to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting, 9 a.m. Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is citizen input for any items not on the agenda as a public hearing. Is there anyone online? Looking behind you there. Okay. Okay, Ashley. So this is public citizen testimony system, citizen input. You'll be joined for our meeting. We have Ashley as the first name.
Hi, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Hello.
Good morning. My name is Ashley. I just have a quick little something to read to you. Many of us are concerned about Crusher Site number 2 being looked at as a possible sanctioned homeless camp. The 2 city-owned acres are less than 400 yards from the Soterra chemical plant. Last week, we heard, shockingly, Bend City Council bring up the topic again. While we are in full agreement, these projects are essential. The public is aware of the environmental impact an industrial accident could cause at the Soterra plant in the case of an emergency such as wildfire. There's nothing worth that risk. We have the opportunity now to say that option is forever off the table to ensure the safety of all our community and our natural resources. I'd also like to request we please put pressure on enforcing camping codes with real impact on county land now. I hope this collaboration with the city will yield real viable long-term solutions to our homeless crisis. All citizens of Deschutes County deserve better than this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the testimony, Ashley.
Bye.
Okay, so Becca. Thank you for joining us, Becca. You may need to unmute. Becca, you may be on our Zoom call now. This is citizen input at the beginning of our board meeting.
All right, good morning, gentlemen. I apologize for that delay there. My name is Becca, and I just have a couple of comments, basically concerned or curious, has there been any more effort been put towards the discussion of managed camp in La Pine? And has there been any conversation with BLM, USFS, and ODF in regards to better land enforcement in regards to our forested lands surrounding La Pine? Just a couple of things that I want to keep in everyone's mind moving forward. I thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. You guys have a great day.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. So this is citizen input, so it's not a discussion at this point in time. So these topics will come up through this board meeting and future board meetings. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. 3 items on the agenda today.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
And I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang? Yes. And Vice Chair will vote yes. At this time, item number 4, we will convene as the 911 Service District. Amendment to a trunk radio user agreement in collaboration with the Oregon Department of Transportation for Deschutes County 911. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Crosswhite, Director of Deschutes County 911. We are here today with an amended agreement for our agreement with ODOT Wireless for our radio system. What we ended up doing is we've had this signed since 2016, and after the last upgrade, which is about 2 years ago with the state, they reduced our amount because of they took away some components that we were actually paying for with the upgrade. And so our amount went from 212,000 down to 178 a year. So then there's a 3% escalator, and this will be in place now until 2031.
Yeah, with an escalator, but yeah, that's pretty, locking it in pretty well. So that's interesting. Great. So, yep, along those lines, I went and attended the statewide communications interoperability meeting yesterday. ODOT's at the table there, and we published the statewide interoperability plan, and we added a chapter about this relationship in this statewide document. There's many jurisdictions and regions that have these radio systems, and there's different partnerships across the state. So this is big, being partner with the state on this, but it sure looks like it's been valuable for us. We add a few towers, they will use their towers, and the coverage is increasing and getting better every year.
It's a great collaborative relationship. We work with them frequently. We have monthly meetings. It's going really well.
Great.
Sarah, as you know, I am always trying to better understand kind of the layout of all this infrastructure and kind of the function, how all the pieces work together. Would you be willing to give me a trunked radio for dummies kind of overview of where these components fit in the system and what function they play?
Well, I may not be the best person, but I can give you kind of my synopsis. So we have a specific amount of towers that we put up, Deschutes County 911 put up within the city of Bend, in Redmond, and Sisters. We have one site that we're going to be putting up at the road department here in the future. All of those are shared with the state. So we actually have ODOT on those sites. We have this troopers on those sites. So OSP. We have some of our city of Bend Public Works on there. So it's a shared system. And what we put in there is, and we have a site at St. Charles as well. So all of our sites are shared with them. So that's what's offsetting the cost with the state. The state has their sites all the way down 97 into all over the state of Oregon. And then ours just supplement that. And so that's kind of what's offsetting the difference in the cost. We have, they have a core here and a core in Salem. We share both. One of them's backup. So if one goes down, we have the secondary one. I would love for you to come and we could actually lay it out on paper so you can kind of see all of our sites, and I can have somebody better explain it to you versus me.
Well, and when I started as commissioner, it was during COVID, and we had to do all this,
Right,
these like
right.
intros to departments by Zoom. So
Yep.
I've been thinking that I'd really love to actually do a second round and actually go and visit people and
Yeah, that would be
maybe
great.
see a tower, things like that.
Oh, yeah. We could take you to one of our new ones.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, yesterday was published the statewide communications interoperability plan. So there's a document, I can send a link out after the meeting, that was published yesterday. And on page 11, as I say, it has a paragraph about our relationship with the state, and it talks about the whole radio systems universe in the state of Oregon. So I can send that out afterwards. Would you like this copy? You got it right there. Okay.
I'll move approval of board signature of document number 2024-685, an amendment to the agreement with ODOT for a continued partnership on the statewide radio system.
And I will second it. Just one other note, Tillamook County's looking at getting a tax general obligation bond out there for their radio system. And there's discussion about could they partner with somebody else also. So this is a discussion that happens around the state in many jurisdictions. So, with that, anything else? Calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And Chair will vote yes. Thank you very much. Item number 5, Oregon National Flood Insurance Program Endangered Species Act Implementation Plan, legislative consideration.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Will Groves, your planning manager, also wearing my floodplain manager hat today
Mhm.
here with you today. I also have Audrey Stewart, associate planner. She's training to get the certification to be a floodplain manager, and so having her help coordinate on these issues. So of course, we're here today per the memo to talk to you about some changes to the flood insurance program that are happening under the Endangered Species Act implementation, and to ask you for some legislative considerations in regard to lobbying efforts. And we're going to start today with Audrey giving you a little bit of background about the process, how we got here today.
Thank you, Will. So for some background, the National Flood Insurance Program, or the NFIP, guides development in the floodplain by establishing minimum standards that cities and counties have to adopt. So for example, Chapter 1896 of Deschutes County Code, our floodplain zone, comes pretty directly from the NFIP. We aren't required to participate in it, but there's a very strong incentive to. So participating allows property owners to receive flood insurance for federally backed mortgages, and it also allows the county to qualify for disaster relief funding. We, as Deschutes County, participate, and primarily we do this through the review of land use applications and building permits. About 10 years ago, there was a lawsuit brought against FEMA by several environmental groups. Their claim was that the NFIP allows development within the floodplain, which then harms endangered species. So Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act says that actions by a federal agency can't harm an endangered species or its habitat. So the argument for this lawsuit is that the NFIP is facilitating development within a floodplain, which is then having a negative impact on endangered species and their habitat. As part of the settlement for this lawsuit, FEMA consulted with the National Marine Fisheries Services, which is part of NOAA, and they created this document called the Biological Opinion. The biological opinion concluded that 17 federally protected species were being harmed by the NFIP, and of those, 16 were at risk for critical habitat loss. So what we're here today to talk to you about is implementation of the recommendations of this biological opinion. Within Oregon, the species that were sort of most identified through this were steelhead, salmon, and then orcas. Your packet includes a map of the areas in Deschutes County that are impacted by this. And I want to note, it's not all of the floodplain zone within Deschutes County. It's just that area within our floodplain zone that was also identified as habitat in this biological opinion. This is an issue that local governments have been tracking for years. It's something that we knew was coming down the pipeline, but didn't know what the specific requirements would be. And this July, FEMA released information on the steps that cities and counties have to take to update their floodplain programs to comply with this biological opinion. And that's what we'll talk more about now.
Thank you, Audrey. So this, under the biological opinion, or BIOP as it's referred to, FEMA is required to take certain actions. And part of those actions are changing regulations to which counties must adhere to in those areas impacted by the lawsuit. And so as you saw in your packet, there's certain areas in Deschutes County that are included in that, and that's primarily along the Waichus, sections of the Crooked River, short sections of the main stem of the Deschutes, mostly far, far north in the county, as well as some irrigation facilities that run from Watson Reservoir through Mackenzie Canyon, and including parts of the Lower Bridge area. So FEMA has announced new pre-implement.
Can you explain to me those irrigation sites? Why are, I mean, those are not anadromous streams.
Certainly. So they are part of the watershed that affect these species. So these are places where if it rained really hard, if you had a rubber ducky on one of these properties and it rained with a 100-year storm, it would end up in the ocean.
Is the concern then about pollutants?
It changes basically any sorts of change to the watershed. So something that might increase sedimentation, change kind of infiltration / runoff capacity, thinking broadly about potential impacts to the water quality, quantity, temperature that come out of these watersheds.
That doesn't make any sense to me because, I mean, we have entire watersheds that contribute to Waichus Creek, the Middle Deschutes River, the Crooked. So if you're picking out certain kinds of off-stream watershed lands, shouldn't we be looking at the entire watershed? Or shouldn't we be excluding lands that are off-stream that are just contributing watershed areas?
A great question. The reason why it's limited to these specific areas is the floodplain is the federal nexus. So this is the area under which the federal government has some obligations to manage for being consistent with, for example, the ESA. So as soon as you leave these floodplain areas, there's not a federal nexus to those lands, and thus they're not impacted by the lawsuit.
Okay, so these are areas where we are in, basically have taken FEMA's sample floodplain regulations. We are applying them, and people are actively participating in the National Flood Insurance Program.
That's correct. So if you think in the big picture, what the flood insurance program does is that in return for counties following FEMA's regulations, our citizens are offered the opportunity to have flood insurance. And for most people, if you're getting a conventional bank loan and you're in a floodplain, you're obligated to get that insurance. Yeah, those are great clarifying questions. So FEMA has announced in that letter these new pre-implementation measures that are required, and communities are required to pick one of these options by December 1st, 2024. So 3 options. First is to adopt a model code that considers impacts to species and requires mitigation to a no net loss standard. Second would be to have a project-by-project habitat assessment. And third would be to just simply prohibit development in these floodplains. Each of these is complicated by the fact that FEMA has to date not released the model code that they're hoping for us to adhere to, or provided the guidance that they suggest that they will provide on how to do a permit-by-permit analysis. So definitely getting pretty late in the clock for us to do anything by December. And that's part of the reason we're here to talk to you today. FEMA's December timeline's unrealistic. Of course, we've been through a number of legislative processes together, and these generally take about 6 months. So even if the board were to choose to prohibit development in these areas, it would take us more than to December 1st to get through that. The staff will be returning to the board in subsequent meetings later in the month to seek direction on what pathway the board wants to take. And there is an additional FEMA meeting coming up where they're speaking to counties. Audrey and I attended one previously, got some additional information, and there's a series of 3 meetings. The third one is coming up in short order. And so we'll attend that meeting and find out what's happened in terms of evolution of the concerns here. If counties choose to adopt the model ordinance, it has to be effective by July 31st, 2025. So in December, we simply have to pick a pathway and then have it in effect by July, which seems more realistic. But Deschutes County can take an approach that delays the effective date of the model ordinance to see how other cities and counties implement it and respond to legal challenges. Deschutes County, as well as other counties, are very concerned with the what sort of technical assistance we'll receive to implement this, amend the zoning ordinance, and gain assistance in reviewing applications. And, there's certain things that are specific to Oregon that we believe that FEMA hasn't considered. Certainly Measure 49 affects takings concerns, clear and objective requirements that may complicate our ability to implement these things. So, to the extent that Deschutes County in good faith adopted the model ordinance, we may find ourselves unable to implement it due to Oregon's land use system. One reason to take that, there's in the memo, there's some significant concern. Ultimately, if you don't adhere to FEMA's regulations, they can suspend flood insurance in your county. I've been our floodplain manager for over a decade. I've been to a number of conferences. In my experience, FEMA suspends floodplain insurance when the local jurisdiction persistently and over years says, we're not going to do what you ask. To the extent that we're making a good faith effort to timely comply, I don't think there's a reason to anticipate that we'd experience any such dire effects. And that's the signaling from FEMA to date. They're between a rock and a hard place in that they lost a lawsuit and are required to implement these measures and are struggling with the resources they have to provide local jurisdictions help implementing those in turn. I want to talk to you finally a little bit about legislative considerations. So we're asking you today for your thoughts about going to our lobbying representatives for legislative efforts. And we're thinking specifically about the clear and objective standards in ORS 197A 400. We haven't even seen the model ordinance at this point, but we expect that there will be some difficulties based on the discussion to date, that there'll be some difficulty making that clear and objective. And we're here today to ask you to consider directing lobbying efforts towards changes to ORS 197A 400, and specifically looking for exemptions to clear and objective requirements for federally mandated standards such as floodplain standards. Right now, 197A 400 says that when working in a location that requires that's in an unincorporated community, non-resource lands, and areas zoned for rural residential use, that standards that pertain to housing have to be clear and objective. And we're concerned that there may be a significant intersection problem with FEMA or other federal guidance. And we think it would be very helpful to the extent that the legislature would clarify that when local jurisdictions are simply passing through federal obligations without creating additional local burdens on that those aren't subject to the clear and objective requirements. Legal counsel has recently been to a conference, and I'm characterizing here that, that both the case law as well as kind of legal opinion about the effect of ORS 197A 400 and the clear and objective standards as it pertains to statutory or federal obligations is unclear. Case law is a little bit all over the place as courts have tried to figure out what it means. And so we would definitely appreciate some clarity that this is at least one thing where we're not expected to, at a local level, solve a problem created by a federal mandate that we may or may not even have control over at that level.
Couple questions. Model ordinance, where is that coming from? Or is somebody working on that?
So it's our understanding that FEMA has coordinated with DLCD to create a model ordinance. DLCD, frankly, the signaling I'm getting from them is that coordination has not been ideal.
Well, I guess, yeah. Can you go another half a step into that? As in, the feds aren't acknowledging the Oregon state land use system, or land use system doesn't have a way to bring it in, or what?
So the problems I think are, and I'll go back through these again in kind of a more concrete terms, is so let's say that we don't have a model ordinance today. If we had
And that would be published by DLCD?
that would be published by FEMA in the Federal Register.
Oh, okay. And then would it be one package for the state of Oregon, or is there any difference between kind of east and west? Because I just think of, the western slopes going out to the ocean is so different than the high desert.
Yeah, and so we anticipate one package for the entire state. And, we haven't seen what's in there, but there have been in the discussions when consistently over the course of years, jurisdictions, particularly coastal jurisdictions who have very significant amounts of their lands in these floodplains, have signaled to FEMA that that they likely will be unable to enforce these regulations, due to Measure 49 takings claims, the clear and objective standards. So there's some significant concerns, both in even if we had the model ordinance and it was easily adopted, we have a problem in that's just less time than we typically take in a legislative process. And we're a pretty robust county in our ability to do that. There's a lot of one-person shops out there where you have a single planner or you're sharing a planner, and these jurisdictions are subject to these same requirements. FEMA has also indicated that the model ordinance is anticipated that there would be local customization, that it's not a plug and play chunk of ordinance. If you look at the current FEMA model ordinance for floodplains in Oregon, we actually have a very customized version of that plugs into our code. The effect is the same, but actually getting all the wires to connect was and has been a significant effort over time. So, and there may be choices to be made there, and we don't even at this point know what those are. So with regard to feedback to FEMA, certainly counties are participating in these meetings, these online meetings that FEMA has made available. Concerns are being raised. FEMA is collecting those. They also are subject to federal regulations and have lost a lawsuit. So they have obligations, again, between a rock and a hard place. So in terms of the PICMs and the biological opinion, today, this is really just an update to you that this is happening and that we'll be back to you with more information. The situation's rapidly evolving. We'll need to make some choices in the face of that. We may need to do that in relatively short order. We're watching how that evolves. The specific ask today really has to do with this legislative concern about clear and objective standards and federal obligations, and asking you to consider deploying at least some of our lobbying efforts towards looking to exemptions to those clear and objective standards for federal obligations.
Well, this has definitely come up at the Association of Oregon Counties. Tillamook was, a commissioner from Tillamook was leading the show a year or two ago. I mean, we've heard about this over the years. Now it's more of a past and implementation phase, which puts us all in this tight little box, I guess.
I've been tracking this issue for over a decade, so I'd like to provide a little bit more context and background. The state of Washington is a few years ahead of us. They lost the lawsuit was lost there first, then they can't, then the salmon and steelhead advocates came to Oregon. So Washington has been through this whole process. I can only imagine that the model ordinance or the model code is going to look pretty similar to what has been implemented in the state of Washington. So I would encourage us to both keep listening to DLCD and NFIP, but also read the writing that's already on the wall, and try to assess how that might play out in a place like Deschutes County. The other big context to consider around this issue is that our climate is changing. Rain on snow events are much more frequent. We are getting much more precipitation as rain than snow. And as a result of this, floodplains are bigger than FEMA thinks they are based on past history. So while the kind of driver for this whole process is an endangered species habitat, essentially what FEMA is doing is telling us you need to map floodplains bigger and prevent people from doing things in those floodplains that make flooding worse and that put them in harm's way. And that's actually, I mean, the whole Endangered Species Act issue aside, that's a good thing. Recognizing that flooding is getting worse and protecting people from flooding is a good thing. So, at the high level, at least, I look at this, I look at this policy change from FEMA positively. Now, the way that it gets applied on the ground in Oregon communities is another question. But I guess I would come into this with that kind of 90,000-foot outlook that this is probably actually a positive thing for Oregon communities, but it needs to be applied well. And I would go from there to say we do want to look at how this is going to land in Deschutes County. That's part of the reason I was asking about why are these lands that aren't even on a anadromous stream being regulated. But also, we also should recognize that the amount of Deschutes County that is affected by this is very, very small compared to some of the coastal counties and counties in the Willamette Valley, who the only flat ground around for people to build on, that where they built their entire towns is in the floodplain. So we're not going to have nearly the same kind of dramatic impacts from this as some other Oregon communities, and given that I am somewhat reluctant to use up some of our legislative advocacy bandwidth to picket this. I just don't think it's at the highest level. I think it's an appropriate policy move. And then at the mid-range, you know, I think it's not a significant enough impact in Deschutes County for us to be wading into the center of this. We have a lot more legislative advocacy capacity. We have a lot more sophisticated land use planning capacity than many counties do, but we should be deploying that based on the relevance to our community. And I'd say there's a whole lot of wildfire stuff that is much more relevant and impactful to our community that we need to be focusing on this fall, winter, spring than this issue.
And to amplify your point, we did a look back over the past decade, and there's fewer than 10 permits in Deschutes County that would have been affected by this. And to the extent that, you know, we've looked to Washington and we've seen early drafts of the model code, it appears that none of these are prohibitions on those projects. They're yes ands requirements that require additional obligations. The specific concern about, and I hear your point about our limited legislative efforts and the fact that we're not really the most affected county by a long shot associated with this, is really not leading a charge against either against this outcome, against, you know, providing these additional protections in these streams, but rather a change to the clear and objective standards that allow those projects to be evaluated under subjective standards. You know, it appears that biologists are going to be involved. And what happens, as we understand it, is if you have a project that relates to housing and it doesn't have clear and objective standards, those standards are effectively waived. And so we then can't enforce the federal obligation, and it's unclear what happens in those circumstances with our relationship to the federal government. This is obviously a problem throughout Oregon. You can imagine that, you know, that's going to be solved in other jurisdictions than ours and fought out in other jurisdictions. Ours would have, just to your point, have extensive floodplains. But this, again, sort of focusing on the clear and objective part of this, we've got our long range division tied up trying to adhere to 197A 400, the clear and objective standards. We've, you know, expended a significant portion of our resources in the past year towards doing that. It's hard work. The road department is a partner as we try to update Title 17 in the language to get there. And it's just a tremendous amount of work, and any sort of relief where we don't even control the requirement. So those things that come out of statute, those things that come out of federal regulation with regard to clear and objective, this just jumped out as something that's has been a problem and resonates on us on existing issues that we've talked to you previously about with clear and objective standards. We don't have any ability to my understanding, we don't have any ability to change the federal lawsuit, the obligations there. You know, we certainly can make some noise about the implementations and the obligations associated with it, ask for leniency in terms of enforcement actions as we, in good faith, try to implement those. So under the BIOP, really not a lot to do there. Under the clear and objective standards, I think there would be some significant benefit to counties to, in terms of just appeal processes, timelines, staff resources, to see some specific carve outs to that clear and objective standard where we don't control what's required of us locally. That may, in fact, and this is a legal question that's come up, that may already be the case. It may be that federal preemption, you know, imposes these obligations on us, but you know, you get 10 lawyers in a room, you're going to get 10 answers about that question. And what LUBA's found in response to those cases, you know, they started out with an initial finding that this is a pretty broad obligation, and then walked it back and said, no, we're only telling you about this very specific thing you asked for. Come back again if you have other questions. So it's a section of the law that could use some refinement, and would definitely help us out to free up resources to achieve other board goals if we had more clarity in that section of statute.
Will, given the areas that are mapped green on these maps, how much housing development activity can we actually really? I mean, you mentioned that there have only been 10 permits within this area in a given period of time. I mean, I appreciate the need to navigate this clear and objective issue, but I mean, how many applications are we really talking about that will be sticky because of this?
I think, honestly, I think it's a handful because the way that floodplains work in Deschutes County, they tend to be relatively incised. And for most properties, getting out of the floodplain means backing your house up 10 feet away from the river. So for most properties, for those that, and our code actually requires you to develop outside of the floodplain if you can. So in our retrospective, looking back at permits in terms of housing related permits, very limited number that had any association with this. Certainly, we've done some bridge improvements. The Redmond Wetland Complex is in a floodplain that's affected by this area. But in terms of the housing nexus, it's quite limited. So to the extent that we were going to make lobbying efforts specifically at this, I doubt that Deschutes County would be leading the charge, but we might be adding our voice to other counties who have significant concerns and much higher impacts associated with the clear and objective standards for federal regulation.
So I support, yeah, getting real clear, as I say, DLCD is going to be able to do this across the state. Default, it talks about default is a permit by permit basis for the pre-implementation compliance measures, which means they're not going to be clear and objective. Just like you mentioned, maybe this is already in the code where there's just this off ramp for clear and objective. So that'll be a learning process across the state, or a rule that rule that could be put out or something. So I support understanding this topic, bringing it back at some point for legislative discussion. As I say, AOC will. I'm sure there'll be a subset of counties at least that are going to be bringing this up during the legislative session. Also, have you heard of other efforts along these lines right now? I mean, this is Deschutes County, small impact. It'll impact a few people directly, but a small impact. Are other counties taking the lead more right now?
Oh, certainly. I would say Tillamook is probably the leader in this regard and has been speaking with FEMA consistently. They've looked at some rather extreme options, frankly. They've looked at leaving the flood insurance program and trying to provide insurance privately rather than comply with these obligations, just because of the complexity of doing that. So we, with what at most will be a handful of impacted properties over the next decade. Obviously, we're the least impacted by that, but there's definitely, I think there were well over 100 attendees to the last FEMA, as FEMA was presenting to counties about what these PICM or pre-implementation measures would look like. There was the entire cast of characters that I know from our sister counties on the coast who are expressing significant concern about the timing, the implementation, their ability to implement this. So definitely we're fortunate in some ways in that, we're not maximally in the crosshairs of this problem.
But we can be up to speed and be able to represent other smaller counties. That's kind of maybe your starting point. When you said there's one person shops, we can digest this fully at Deschutes County and understand a position that may be valuable for development. As I say, the minimal development. So, with this discussion, I'm just kind of thinking through the fact that I support being up to speed on it and taking a legislative position, as the legislative session comes around. Because we're not really making decisions today. It's just getting up to speed.
That's fine. I mean, I think we can track this at AOC. I don't think it's a good use of Deschutes County staff resources, but that's my opinion.
Well, so I think I'm seeing that if we need to go down a clear and objective path without any hope of really getting there, that's kind of the conundrum, correct?
That's correct. And I think, again, this is really an informational set.
Yep.
We're not looking for a motion today. We expect there to be more information. At some point, the model code will be published and we'll have some notion about how difficult it'll be to implement. And, I think a kind of a primary function today is really just to get you warmed up that we're going to be coming back with something that, at least FEMA would like us to undertake urgently.
Can I just ask one question? DLCD is aware, and they've been participating in this process, I know, since the beginning. And while the coordination may be less than desirable on behalf of the department also is aware of this obligation and this requirement for counties to have clear and objective standards. So I'm wondering if the department, given that if I do a quick calculation, maybe 31 of Oregon's 36 counties are subject to implementing this, and they are aware that the model code is coming out, is DLCD going to take that model code, for example, from Washington or wherever it's coming from, and then creating an Oregon version with clear and objective standards? It seems like that would be a good use of DLCD's time to help implement the Oregon program in modifying the model code to a format that might work for maybe not all, but most Oregon counties as a method. I'm just curious if that question's been asked of DLCD.
So yes, on the 7th of this month, I asked them about model code, timing, clear and objective standards, the per property analysis pathway. DLCD acknowledged that they were aware of that situation, recognizing the difficulties about this, and suggesting that we amplify those concerns to FEMA. So I don't know that at this point it's unclear that there's a specific DLCD work plan to receive the Federal Register version of the model code and then provide something that would potentially work better in Oregon. I think that we're having a difficulty in that the FEMA is obliged to make something initially, and then at least in the meeting that we had with FEMA, they acknowledged that there would be some local customization, and to what extent DLCD participates in it provides technical assistance for these customizations is unclear. For example, if we were not to adopt the model code and go to a project by project analysis, there were lots of questions from jurisdictions that said, who's going to evaluate if a project, if a project comes in and says, hey, I comply with a no net loss standard, here's how. Is FEMA going to review these? And they said, maybe a little at first, but we don't have the resources to do this. So some significant questions about, how jurisdictions even make these decisions. Some jurisdictions asked some, pretty direct questions. They said, look, if I don't have the ability to review this, what if I just approve everything? I have no technical expertise in this. If somebody says it's going to be fine because I say so and I say yes, what's FEMA going to do? And FEMA at that point, I think that they hadn't thought about that question very carefully, but they would say, look, you're technically complying at that moment. You are obliged to have a process. You did. That's where we're at. So it seems like there's a lot of loose ends at this moment.
If I can just ask a follow-up question, Chair. I appreciate that DLCD is saying we should amplify these issues to FEMA. FEMA is addressing this across multiple states. I don't even know the full magnitude of it. But they're not going to create a model code that fits Oregon's requirements. They're going to fit one that works in most cases. So I would think there might be an opportunity when DLCD and LCDC, they have their check-in on their annual work plan. Generally, it occurs in October, and often they open public comment in September, is to say, ask DLCD, look, I appreciate you're asking us to amplify this issue to FEMA, but we really need DLCD's help in crafting an Oregon specific model, because the project by project evaluation is effectively, I hate to say it, but it's probably a no build project. I mean, it's effectively precluding it because it's the feasibility of conducting this assessment for a single family home. I can't imagine how that's going to financially pencil out for any, given the uncertainties, the cost, the time, the analysis, et cetera, and then the unknown outcomes. So it seems like just in my opinion, hopefully at least DLCD will help create a model code that is something that counties could consider if that's a path forward. I don't know. It just
great thoughts and questions. So the code that FEMA will provide is an Oregon specific code. So
it is. Okay.
The lawsuit was, as Commissioner Chang noted, was initially they lost a lawsuit in Washington. Specific Washington implementations were put into place, and now they're coming to Oregon. The concern that we've got is that at the Oregon level is that we haven't seen this model code that's going to be coming out, and it may be an amazing perfect fit that we can plug right in and solves all of our problems. But the level of surprise that FEMA has represented consistently when we bring up issues like clear and objective and Measure 49 and taking issues suggests that they haven't thought about that. And at the same time, they had promised to publish it last week and they haven't published it. So maybe some of our concerns are being addressed as part of this. So I think the steps at this point are wait for the model code. And then to the extent that we or other jurisdictions believe that we need local resources to make this viable at the local level, coming to DLCD and asking for that help.
There are areas that I'm puzzled aren't appearing on this map, marked in green. I mean, are there no properties covered by the National Flood Insurance Program in Tumalo, for example? Indian Ford Creek, tributary to Waichus. I mean, is there nothing in those areas?
Those are great questions. So the map, what it shows is it shows those areas that fall in, and I'm forgetting the particular word for it. There's areas that were identified in the lawsuit as potentially impacting that. So you can see on page, is it the second page of the memo? There's an Oregon-wide map that shows those areas that are affected by that. So only in those portions of Deschutes County are we considering it at all. And the reason why the main stem of the Deschutes isn't considered is that there's a barrier to fish pass, a natural barrier to fish passage that prevents anadromous species from coming up the main stem of the Deschutes. So that's why you're seeing the kind of the Deschutes and all of its tributaries excluded from this. The Waichus does connect as well as the Crooked.
Yeah, but you have irrigated areas that aren't even part of a natural stream channel that are included because they contribute to Waichus Creek or the Crooked River. I mean, it just doesn't, the map doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the floodplain map, that's a complicated thing. So, I mean, if you think about the section that goes from Watson Reservoir towards the Lower Bridge area, my understanding is that there are impoundments. There are impoundments associated with irrigation facilities, and were those irrigation facilities to fail, the flooding would go down that channel. And to the extent that it ever, rained for, 10 days in a row, water would start to flow down those areas. And so they've been mapped as floodplain, but certainly the floodplain maps, there's reason for significant revision of those. It's just, it's relatively expensive. So you may recall from our process years ago, specifically in that area, we were working to try to figure out for a particular family, a difficulty they were having with the floodplain in that area. And the floodplain map had been mapped in association with an open irrigation canal, which would have become the default flow pathway in the event of a high precipitation event. And they'd been said it's piped. And so the question was, well, what do we do about that? And the answer is you get an engineer out, you get a bunch of computer modeling, and you'd say, okay, the water's not here, it's now there. Or maybe it would all get absorbed in the ground. When we have done studies, there have been these types of studies in the Tumalo area for isolated basins. And the result of those studies was that the extent of flooding was significantly less, but still there was an anticipation that there would be ponding in high events. So it may well be that there's flooding still in these areas. And one thing that can be very difficult for people is when you move the floodplain. I mean, certainly we want people to respond to the actual hazard. Best science, best available information is important, but there can be significant public outcry when someone who wasn't previously mapped floodplain, now you have an engineer come in and say, well, actually, if it does rain really hard, it's going to come through your house. And now you have significant insurance obligations, development complications, and now endangered species issues. So the politics for improving the visible accuracy of the floodplain and getting people to take better precaution against the hazard that's exposed to it also plug in the cost considerations and constituent considerations.
Yeah, no, and thus, when I was talking about the context, the literal change in just a few years, a couple of decades of where the floodplain should be mapped, relative to a changing climate. I mean, that is something that a lot of people don't want to hear, but it is a really good thing for them to know that they are vulnerable now when they didn't think they were. I specifically ask about Tumalo because, as has come up during some of our comp plan discussions, particularly winter flow through Tumalo is being restored to much more natural levels over time as part of river restoration efforts. And groundwater table is going to be higher. The floodplain is going to be bigger. And that is only a real short distance above Steelhead Falls. So uh, that seems a whole lot more relevant to me than, these irrigation canal served areas that aren't on a natural stream channel. But that's just my opinion.
Without taking too much of a detour, that Tumalo area, we are tracking that. I mean, working in coordination with FEMA, they are they have a program through which that they can do kind of small projects for jurisdictions. And so I have asked them and they've agreed to produce what's called a non-regulatory map for Tumalo. So they are, and this is sort of a catch as catch can, no promised delivery date, but they have executed these previously for us, is produce, again, what's called a non-regulatory product. So under the HCP, different flow scenarios, increased winter-based flow rates put on top of projected flooding, but not redoing the calculations for climate change, at least seeing what the predictions specifically in Tumalo would be for those changes. And the anticipation is that within about a year, we would receive what's called a non-regulatory map. So it wouldn't update the flood obligations, the insurance obligations, but it would give our planners the opportunity to say, look, you're not mapped in the floodplain, but there's a good reason to believe in HCP year 20 that statistically your hazard is higher than you'd expect. You probably want to back your house up another 5 feet or build it up another foot higher. So we've taken, this is the concern that you've raised is very much on my mind, as well as other people in the community, and certainly a number of people who participated in the HCP. And so at this point, the non-regulatory map has the advantage of it's relatively less cumbersome to produce. We can give people good information sooner, and it doesn't change their exposure to flood insurance costs in a way that can be real difficult to ask a community to take part in.
Great. Thank you for the update. That's a real interesting dynamic between local, state, and federal.
Yeah, really appreciate your time today. We'll be back with more.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
So that was item number 5. And for item number 4, I did convene us as the 911 service district. So we didn't make any decisions there. So let's just acknowledge we're reconvening as the Board of Commissioners. So item number 6 is continued deliberations, RV and rental dwellings. Morning, Tanya.
Morning, commissioners. Can you hear me okay? It's okay.
Oh, go ahead and use the mic though. We want.
Oh, yes.
It's all, yep,
That everyone else can.
yeah.
For the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner, Community Development. Excuse me. I'm here for continued deliberations of the text amendments for RVs as rental dwellings. That's file number 247-23000-700 TA. This is the purpose of this, and the memo associated with this agenda item is to just report back on our progress since staff last met with the board. That was on June 10th, and actually Will Groves did it because I was out of town. Just a little procedural background. The Planning Commission process took place at the end of last year. With their, we went to the board in the beginning of this year. The public hearing was held on May 8th with the Board of County Commissioners. The written record for that hearing was held open until May 29th. So the record has been closed since May 29th. On June 10th, staff began the deliberative process with the board. This was a fairly standard meeting where we kind of reviewed all that had occurred to date in terms of public input, Planning Commission recommendation, just all of the issues that were raised during that process. At that time, the board directed staff to go back and further coordinate and further research a couple of issues that had bubbled up to the surface throughout this process. So that was slightly different than the normal process. Often we go right into deliberative matrix and start kind of honing in on text amendment details. But in this case, the board directed staff to look into a few items. Those items fell into 2 categories. One is fire related and 2 is related to other Oregon counties. And this is sort of a procedural matter that I'll just provide an overview of. As I just noted, the record did close on May 29th. So this is All of this input that I'm giving right now is outside of the record, so therefore intended to be very, very general, nothing that would be involved in making any sort of decision. And as I'll get to in a moment, if directed by the board, staff can choose to reopen the record and then kind of put all that specific information into the record to be considered in a further decision-making process. So first, I'll just touch on the issues that rose about wildfire and the fire protection districts. As it's been discussed a few times, this proposal that would allow RVs as rental dwellings, as second dwellings, the potential difficulty is that these RVs would not be taxed as real property, so therefore would not generate additional funding that would then be distributed in part to rural fire protection districts to be able to perform their duties on these additional dwellings. So that was a concern that was raised by the public, by some of the fire districts that participated in, that offered testimony and discussed by the board. So, this could potentially, I believe there were about 12,000, 13,000 eligible properties. Not that they would all necessarily come online on day one, but that would represent an additional resource necessary for either emergency calls, fire calls, or kind of permit type sign-offs from those fire districts. So there was a concern about how might we pay for this if it's not automatically built into the property tax system. Staff was able to coordinate with one fire district. Admittedly, it is sort of a difficult time to get in touch with them. They have been extremely busy, and it is fire season, as we all know. They did provide us with some helpful information concerning the viability or not viability of fees and regulatory options. Again, I'm not getting any more specific because it's not information to be entered into the record. But I will also note that today, later this afternoon, there is a meeting of the Central Oregon Fire Chiefs Association. And at the time of the writing of this memo, we weren't sure if it was happening, but it is happening. So I am scheduled to go to them today, this afternoon, to talk about these issues further and potentially receive some more input on potential funding and regulations that might be related to this.
So I'll support opening the record. And you've given us lots of good information and you're saying this isn't in the record. So
Yes.
I'll get there. Okay. Yeah. So there you go. If it wasn't clear, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And again, we don't know how many people are going to be there today. We don't know the level of input we're going to receive, but it's certainly better than what we have right now. So I'll cut to the chase if that helps.
Well, just acknowledging that with the expectation of open record is
Yeah. Okay. That's
maybe give you a little bit more leeway.
I appreciate that. But the record would not yet be open.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah.
Still. It's the timing's a little awkward, but yeah, so the plan is to go to that meeting this afternoon and see what we can get. The idea is that any input received, whether that's from the fire districts individually or today at this meeting, would then be summarized by staff in a memo that would then be put in the record. If it were to be reopened. If fire districts and others wanted to submit their own individual testimony, they would of course be welcome to do that. But the one that we spoke to was comfortable with us providing a summary. So just to kind of smooth the process out a little bit. So that's the general gist of what the issues surrounding wildfire and fire protection district outreach has been. The second, which is somewhat smaller, is just looking at other Oregon counties. And again, we've discussed this in the past. Deschutes County is often one of the first counties to proceed with any legislative update that is coming from state law. Again, we did this with ADUs and here we are with RVs. The board did express interest in finding out where other counties have landed thus far. Right now, we're aware that Clackamas County just adopted theirs, and Nick or Peter, whoever, if you have information that I don't have, feel free to weigh in. But Clackamas just adopted some amendments. I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Those will go into effect on September 3rd. So they're not in place yet. We don't know how it's, landed. But if/when we reopen the record, we could provide a summary of those amendments. We have more information from other counties on why or why not they are proceeding or where they're at in their process. So that is my general summary of those two issues that the board directed staff to look into. So with that, the options include proceeding to deliberations with the existing record, the one that closed on May 29th, reopening the record for a period of time to allow for new information. So that might include today's information that I received this afternoon, comment from the public. I've received a few inquiries, still wanting to provide additional input from the public. So that would of course be an option. And then we could also follow up with counties to see if any, how that has shaken out, if anybody else has proceeded further. Staff recommends an open record period of 3 months to try to capture that. That would be the hope of getting additional input from fire districts. Hopefully fire season will have waned by then slightly, or more than slightly, I should say. The other option, the third option, is to pause the process without reopening the record for a specific period of time. Just take a pause, wait to see where the other counties go, wait to see how ADUs go here, just a general pause, and revisit it at a date in the future. And I know there's only 2 of the board here, so it's also possible that if there's not a decision to delay this out as needed.
Any thoughts?
I'd be in support of reopening the record. 3 months. Yeah, to give the fire districts adequate time to provide input to us, that seems appropriate. We got about 5 or 6 weeks of really active fire season left. So I'd go for option 2, I guess.
As I was reading the options, I remember thinking through the process of, well, let's see, can we do this in a couple of weeks? Well, maybe 30 days. And then the words are in here, period of 3 months. I'm like, oh, so does it really need to be 3 months,
I mean, for the fire district, for the input from the fire districts, I think we do need to give them basically sometime past September.
Well, we knew, well, as I say, I'm just saying that when I was reading it, that's exactly my thought process. And then it says, oh, 3 months. So yeah, we're in an interesting spot. Fire response for structure fires is different than EMS. EMS is mentioned around the state. In fact, we had a legislative roundtable. Jeff Blake from Jefferson County, been in Bend for many years. He was explaining that there's a full-on legislative need to discuss the cost of EMS runs and reimbursements for all agencies. So as I say, I see that as 2 different paths. Also, for fire, we already have, we're getting calls all the time. My neighbor has 3 RVs and people are living in them, and it's already happening all over the place. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that it's nice to think that we're going to design the solution on paper. Yeah, but the reality of where we're at right now is so challenging. So just some high level thoughts. Yeah, so 2.5 months.
Yeah,
There we go.
Okay, I prepared a draft order that was 3 months. I was a little brazen in that one. So I can certainly draw up a revised one and submit that.
Yeah, so the order number though is
The order number is
available. Yep.
2024-029. I can revise that.
So yeah, this would be an order opening the record for this file.
Correct. And that would include written notice to everybody who's participated in the process so far. So all of the public. So it's important that with this record, we will, as staff, submit a memo summarizing input we've gotten, but also this gives the public a chance, time-wise, for them to digest that and respond to it if they feel the need.
Yeah.
I believe that would be, so the 3 months was November 14th. So I'm assuming that would be
First would
November
be
There we
1st.
go.
tidy date to put in.
There you go. Or October.
Scratch out the 4 and
Yeah.
call it good.
There you go. Scratch out the 4.
Wonderful. Thank you for this. Appreciate it.
So yeah, is there a motion then?
So do I need to
Just order number.
move this order number as amended?
Mm-hmm.
So, move approval of order number 2024-029 amended to reflect a conclusion date of November 1st, 2024.
And I will second it. So yeah, that was good discussion, and thank you very much coming to a negotiation there. So any other discussion?
Since we're reopening the record, I'll be really interested to hear how the the language, the regulations that Clackamas County has developed are different than or different or similar to what we've been imagining or putting pencil to paper for, at a future date.
Staff will provide that for sure.
Okay, so calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for keeping this project moving.
Oh, I see what I did here. Okay. At this time, item number 7, department performance measure updates. I see people streaming into the room. Thank you very much for joining us.
Morning, Commissioners. Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. Today, we have 5 departments who have been selected to provide updates on progress made during fiscal year 24, quarter 4, on selected performance measures that fall under the county goals and objectives of service delivery. So first up, we have 911, and I believe Chris Perry will be providing that update.
Morning, Commissioners. Chris Perry, Operations Manager for Deschutes County 911. Q4 performance measure I'm reporting out on today is part of the Commission's goals and objectives related to service delivery, which is to support and promote Deschutes County's customer service every time standards. 911 specific performance measure is to continue to meet and exceed the National Emergency Number Association, or NENA, standard for call answering times by regularly auditing operational and technical practices internally as it relates to call answering. The NENA standard, or target percentage, is to answer 90% of 911 calls during the busiest hour of the day in 10 seconds or less. Our busiest hour always falls between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. and most commonly between 4 and 5 p.m. Our Q4 percentage is 97.35% of the time we're answering 911 in 10 seconds or less, so far exceeding the NENA standard. NENA is an association that empowers its members and the greater 911 community to provide the best possible emergency response through standards development, training, thought leadership, outreach, and advocacy. We are members of NENA and at times utilize their standards and training in our day-to-day operations, call answering being, of course, one of them. The speed in which we answer the public's call for help, as you know, is imperative to assessing and addressing the emergency being reported, and continuing to ensure those calls are answered in a timely manner is crucial to maintaining public trust in our first responder system. So we're very proud to keep the bar high for our 911 center on the standard, and we're committed to regularly evaluating our business practices, staffing levels, policies, and procedures to ensure that this service remains at a high level. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
So that's the call maker to the call taker, right? So I mean, yesterday I was at the interoperability meeting and the Next Gen 911 was discussed. And it is the basics of somebody wanting to call for service. And I'm just acknowledging that future may be different when we get to Next Gen 911, which is going to be a technology step. But yeah, congratulations and thank you. I think of that 97.35, the folks that fall out of that 10% or 10-second response time are probably 11 or 12 seconds, probably not too much more. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
90% is a good goal, and 97.35% is an excellent exceedance of that goal.
Thank you.
Next up, we have County Clerk Steve Dennison.
Morning, Commissioners. Steve Dennison, for the record, Steve Dennison, County Clerk. I'm here to present a brief update on our department's support of the Commissioner's goals to support and promote Deschutes County's customer service every time standards. And with that, this is more on the fiscal, along the lines of fiscal, and with our election personnel operating costs of tracking per 1,000 ballots tallied for countywide elections, we target to remain within 10% of similar types of elections since we've been tracking. And that target goal is for $419 per thousand. And with this last primary election, we came in at $328 per thousand. ballots cast. So we do that by, we're able to do that because of utilization of technology. And we've talked about this before, specifically with our voting system that we had changed to 7 years ago, allows us to really streamline the process and adjudicate ballots in a more efficient manner, and we're saving a lot of money there. We did spend a little bit more in this election, this presidential primary election, compared to the last presidential primary, and that was mainly due to increase in frequency of ballot drop box pickups and staff overtime. But other than that, we're still well within that goal, and continue to maintain that and try to be as fiscally responsible as possible. Happy to answer any questions.
Is that $419 number a Deschutes County number, or is that more of a industry or state number or anything?
It was an average over elections that was since we've been tracking.
Just in Deschutes County.
In Deschutes County.
Yeah, that was kind of my
correct. Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to know that number after the fact, because if it goes way up or down, I mean, I guess down would be a choice too. But yeah, understanding that total cost.
Yeah, as costs have increased, staffing costs, personnel costs have increased. So I think that moves the needle as well. But as I actually look back at previous elections, that $419 is actually lower than I would have expected, or what the average actually is. It's closer to $500. So when we're in that $300 range, we're actually still doing very, very well.
Well, and as the clerk and as coming up to a big election, I mean, do what you need to do to make sure we don't make national news by having a hiccup that we can't explain, right? I mean, that's kind of the big picture.
A lot of wood up there, Commissioner. Would you please knock on something?
Yeah, like kind of wood. Exactly.
Yeah, no. And of course, in November, the personnel charges are as high as any other election that we conduct here. So more to come on that.
Yeah. Well, democracy is a gift and is a real privilege for all of us who have a chance to cast our ballots. And it's good to know that to tally one of those ballots cost about 32 cents.
Yeah. For this election. And again, for each election, it obviously depends on turnout. We have those same costs that are maintained throughout each election, regardless of the election type. So our ballot costs for these larger elections do increase for personnel due to a lot of things. Again, frequency of ballot pickups and the amount of staff overtime, as I mentioned.
How does the postage get charged back? As in, people drop off their ballot, they're not mailing it back.
I think we'd spoken a little bit about this as the county bears the majority of the cost for conducting elections. The state doesn't pay for a lot, but they do pay for that return postage.
Okay.
So that's very helpful.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, exciting.
Next up, we have Peter Gutowski, CDD Director.
Good morning, Commissioners. Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. There are 6 performance measures that I can certainly highlight. All of them are relatively within our performance measure targets. The biggest challenge that the Community Development Department has right now, and it's not reflected in this information, and the CDD has been very transparent and forthcoming. We have choke points with intake right now. And so what does that mean? When building plans, on-site wastewater plans are submitted, it's taking us 4 weeks to just get those routed. And that's a reflection of staff transitions. We've had some resignations that occurred in early this calendar year. 3 of seasoned permit technicians, and to replace them, which is forthcoming, and to train new permit technicians has created this circumstance. So we are doing everything we can to process that pinch point, but it is admittedly a challenge. Once those are routed, you can, as this information for the end of the fiscal year notes that our inspection stops are well within our targets. We try to do 8 to 12 a day. We're right there, just rounding up to 9. The reliance on innovative technology as it pertains to on-site wastewater systems for pre-cover inspections, we're well above the target at 93%. Building plan reviews which typically take 8 to 10 days to turn around. We're just about a week past that point. We've had some staff that are on paternity leave, which has impacted us with that measure. The issuance of on-site septic systems within 12 days is taking us just over a week, so it's not too extensive of a delay. And then the last 2 performance measures pertain to certain types of land decisions, those that have with notice and without notice. We're fairly close. With those that require notice, the decision being issued within 45 days, it's taking us 56 days. So certainly happy to answer any questions or comments about Community Development Department's performance. I just want to underscore, we recognize these situations and are doing everything we can to process these administrative decisions or building permits or on-site wastewater permits. It's just right now we don't have all of our staff here due to some family medical leave opportunities, and also just with turnover that we've had at staff. So we anticipate bringing on a new permit technician the first week of September. We have a recruitment for a building inspector at an A level that's open until filled. That was just released, and thanks to the Board of Commissioners for supporting that additional FTE. So while I recognize these aren't perfect, and certainly this pinch point that I've been talking about, I want to be optimistic that as we get into the fall and winter months, which are our slower seasons, we will be better positioned for development activity for calendar year 25. So happy to answer any questions or any comments you may have.
What does that mean for Lapine and Sisters? So the services we provide for those cities.
It is
What's
those that are listening. Deschutes County provides building services, building plan review, the issuance of building permits for the cities of Lapine and Sisters. So that's rolled into those numbers in terms of
but not land use, though. Again,
but not land use
That's
and
what I was-
not
kind of that division.
not on-site wastewater. So it's just the building division. So I think those measures that are reflected here in this summary apply to the city of Lapine and Sisters.
Mhm.
Both of them are still steady. So the land use component, which can hold up the issuance of building permits, that's coordinated with both those respective cities. But we continue to remain responsive to both jurisdictions.
Well, and I think I'd come to a conclusion a while ago. Let's get excited about recruiting. Let's do what we need to do to get the word out on the streets. This is the moment. We need to have a strong bench, strong team. I got to imagine there's a cycle coming. It's quiet right now. It's kind of awkward. Inflation and interest rates, everything. But there's an upside out there somewhere.
Yeah, a great point. And one of the other noteworthy approaches that we're taking, we are about to fill an administrative assistant. Previously, this was a position that we had in the planning division. That position was it evolved last fall due to some financial circumstances that CDD experienced.
Mhm.
We are filling an administrative assistant position, but that person is going to work across divisions to provide better, not only support for the planning division, but also for coordinated services, which we believe will free up permit technicians to not necessarily be to be in a secretarial role, to just receive those customers that come in through the lobby. So we're staying nimble, we're adaptive, to your point. And we've had really good candidates for both the permit technician, the administrative assistant. We have a recruitment for code enforcement. So that is very encouraging. Fingers crossed that we get the same kind of level of interest for this A-level building inspector position. So
Great.
no, thank you. We're staying nimble
Mm.
as much as possible.
Lean and nimble.
Lean and nimble. Yeah, definitely on the lean part. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jason from Human Resources.
Good morning.
Hello.
Jason Bavuso, Human Resources Manager for the record. I'm pleased to speak with you today about HR's performance measures and specifically our performance measure related to timely recruitment support. This is a measure that is really a product of our HR business partner teams, and that's Natalie Jones and Yevra DePalmer. And Robin Edwards, who really do the work associated with recruiting open positions, and then supported by our business partners, Jen Clemens and Bailey Gregor. So we have put in these teams have put in a lot of work over the last year to bring consistency to their work. And part of that is to establish what we term standard turnaround times for commonly executed transactional tasks. And this is one of those and ties to our performance measures in terms of collaboration with departments to provide those supports. The performance measure that we're specifically discussing, it reads to achieve 100% of recruitments opening within 21 days of receipt of recruitment authorization paperwork in good order. And HR did actually achieve 100% in Q4. I think we might have reported 98% at one time until that was calendar days, and as we consolidated to business days, that one straggler fell below the standard. We averaged, however, I think the more meaningful number is just a hair under 6 days. And the recruitment preparation process is an iterative one. We don't receive everything we need. We receive an authorization, we prepare a posting draft, we pass it to the department reviews, makes edits, passes it back to us. Sometimes it may go back and forth one more time. And these are all steps that are captured within those 6 days. So departments are typically pretty responsive because they're motivated to get their staff hired and positions posted.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some variability in that. Regardless, even with that variability, 6 days is where we've landed, or 5.97. I'll just say briefly that we recognize that getting a posting out there into the world for our potential candidates to view and apply for, that's only one part of onboarding new employees and resituating existing employees into new positions. So we're happy to be meeting this performance measure, but we recognize that our work's not done and it does continue. So
it's a whole system.
Yes, it is, from posting to new employee orientation and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, just want to express my brief gratitude to our business partner teams for their ongoing commitment to supporting departments in this and the myriad other ways that we do so.
So when average is 5.97 and the goal is 21, is there a big variability there do you get we need this person, but they don't have a good definition of the position and then it takes a long time, or what slips it out to?
Sometimes the department will want to hold. We'll go through some of these preparatory steps and they'll say, you know what, we're gonna pause until December. And sometimes those delays will be of significant length that we may actually not count that recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually modified this performance measure for FY25 to focus on our processing time and
outside influences.
Yeah, take out some of the nuances that happen at the department level.
Great. Any questions?
No questions.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have IT, and I believe Zach is going to be reporting out.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Zach Neiman. I'm the Information Security Manager for the county. I'll be reporting this morning on the performance measure of possessing a minimum level of IG2 for all 18 CIS controls.
What's IG2?
Yeah, it's the Implementation Group 2, and CIS is the Center for Internet Safety. Or
There you go.
And at the end of the day, where this measure was born from was an audit that was performed on the county for cybersecurity some years ago. And prior to my position, which was implemented this April, there was a need for a stopgap for a framework and an ability to address consistency and security for the county. And so that stopgap was CIS controls and trying to get to that implementation group 2, which is essentially a group of those controls and safeguards to make us more secure. Since I came along, the performance measure has changed in that we decided that developing a custom framework for the county that is built on our strategic vision, our plans, missions, and goals for each department that aligns more closely with what our goals and purposes as a county is better than taking something out of the box. And I'm happy to say that we have developed that, have met with county administration and presented that, and are working towards keeping regular metrics on those functions and that framework, and bringing along a lot of the other departments to partner with us, and everything from developing a single pane of glass for security for us to see faster events and faster remediation for security alerts, to security being involved in decision-making for software and services. Those are all metrics that we have been making improvements on over the last few months. And I'm happy to say that we are making improvements, but we have slightly shifted away from CIS into our own custom framework, which was designed and built off of not only CIS, but NIST and also ISO, as well as a lot of our own missions and objectives for our county that make us unique and different from other organizations.
Great. A lot of work being done there.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was able to see the state Enterprise Information Services. I don't know if he's the director, but Ben Gertziger, and he mentioned they're working on a cybersecurity effort around the state and looking for local government participation. And I might have mentioned this, you folks on there. So there may be something coming along, and I don't know exactly what it was. He just mentioned at the end of the meeting, but they're really looking forward to, maybe comparing notes across the state for local governments, because it's serious business. Anybody go down, and it's going to affect a lot of state business.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say that since I've been here, we've been partnering with a lot of the departments, a lot of other government agencies around the state, from the state to the city of Bend to other counties and cities, but also interdepartmentally within the county, and trying to support like Steve Dennison in elections, and helping be more secure in that in ways that we haven't done in the past.
There's an official after action report published for Curry County also, and that was a big deal. And it was interesting at the very beginning of it. It talks about how some people noticed some of the machines were acting a little funny, and then I think it was on a Friday, so the Monday morning came in and just about everything was encrypted across their whole organization. And so it's just being aware. Shutting off the machine or something might have stopped a whole bunch of activity. So. Okay. Well, thank you for being an expert in that area for us.
Thank you for keeping us safe while we're doing our work.
Commissioners, if I just may offer, the public facing departments, as you heard from 911 clerk's office and CDD, a lot of people see and experience their work in the community. But I want to take just a brief moment to really thank our human resources and IT departments, and Tanya Mahood, our director in the back, and on the other side, Kathleen Hinman with Human Resources. They have so much on their plate that the public doesn't see, that they don't experience, and these are just a couple of their performance measures. They are really excelling to support the entire county and then the services we provide. So I just really want to recognize Tanya and Kathleen for the great work that they and their teams, Zach, and we heard from Jason, are doing to support the whole county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Item number 8, acceptance of a community capacity building grant from Pacific Source. Looks like Janice is joining us. Thank you.
Sorry.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Janice Garceau, Director of Health Services for Deschutes County. And I believe I may have two colleagues joining virtually who may have some sort of more boots on the ground subject matter expertise about the work that will be involved with this grant. And that is Casey Burgess and Nicole Lunetta. So I'm here today to move approval of chair signature of document number 2024-702 to accept a community capacity building grant from Pacific Source. In May of 2024, the board gave approval for Deschutes County Health Services to apply for Oregon Health Authority Health-Related Social Needs, or HSRN, grant in the amount of $686,000. $947,000. We were actually awarded $475,210, and we're seeking your approval to accept the funding. This funding will allow us to participate in OHA's HRSN initiative, which was a project of the state to authorize spending up to $119 million to create infrastructure so that folks in the community who are in need of basic needs can have those needs met through Medicaid dollars. That's a very lay sort of description of what those dollars do. What the funding does for us in particular is it helps us establish the technology, development of business and operational practices, workforce, outreach, education, and stakeholder convening that allows us to participate in getting those services out into the community. This is really an infrastructure building grant. It is for a period of 18 months. And it will help us to screen, collect, and analyze data and understand communities' HRSN needs and establish formal pathways to refer individuals and families to community-based organizations that meet needs like nutrition, heat, cooling, potentially housing in the future. I think they're still working on that, et cetera. We, of course, applied for a certain amount. We received slightly less, and we've revised the budget. In effect, what it does is support 18 months of a clinical information systems administrator. That is actually an existing full-time equivalent staff. And with the savings from that funding of the existing staff, we will have someone work out of class to cover some of the duties that she will not be able to do because she will be managing this project for 18 months. It may also free up some dollars for some temporary or on-call time. We're not certain yet. We will see what the workload is. It also allows $72,355 to purchase tablets and touchscreen devices and data plans to administer screenings to individuals in the community that identify needs, $22,000 to make improvements to our electronic health record system and streamline the work to better coordinate with outside organizations. So this really has to do with how we get referrals through our electronic medical record and into the community. And this particular grant did allow us to cover indirect costs. So we have built in the appropriate amount for indirect costs. And that is the size of it. I see that Nicole and Casey are on the screen, and I want to invite them to add anything they feel I've missed.
Good morning, Commissioners. Janice, that was a great overview. Nothing to add here. Thank you.
Okay. So a couple questions. Pacific Source, is this Health Council or is this Pacific Source? So they're Medicaid, kind of the provider.
This is Oregon Health Authority Medicaid dollars that come down through the CCO to providers. So we were one of some other folks in the community who applied. I believe there was a larger entity that applied to actually be the hub for these services. And again, Casey may know more about that as well.
And this is kind of safety net services for anybody in our community?
These are safety nets. Sorry, Casey, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
No, that's fine. These are Medicaid covered individuals specifically.
Okay.
What this can include, though, is helping people enroll in benefits if we find that if we encounter someone in the community who has extremely low income and may not need a mental health service, but may need some help accessing nutrition services or housing supports, this would actually create a capacity to refer those and to help get them enrolled. So we can do OHP as sister work with them, or the agencies we refer them to can, and to then refer them to an agency that might be able to meet their basic needs. So there would be some pathways to help engage people who might need additional assistance. But yes, this is specifically targeted to members of OHP.
You said nobody will there be a new FTE?
There will not be
Yeah,
a
so
new
this is
FTE.
money that'll
Yeah.
go through our system.
Yeah. So in effect, Casey, whose frankly, whose brainchild this was, and she deserves an enormous amount of credit for pulling this application together. Casey will be the project lead for 18 months. She has a lot of expertise already in referral pathways. She's one of our CISAs who does work in our electronic medical record, and has worked at the state level actually on health information technology in this sphere. And she will be driving the project, helping set up the systems, working with staff to organize workflows, and then her position, some of her duties will be covered by backfilling with an existing staff who will work out of class to cover those duties. It also covers point one of a project manager in-house to do some of the convening of the clinical staff that need to support the work that Casey will be designing.
So then, Casey, what's expected outcomes? I mean, what are we excited about here?
This is a really exciting project that is similar to, it's a structure that's similar to the North Carolina hub. They implemented a Medicaid waiver similar to this. And what's happened is tremendous improvement to health outcomes for these individuals, because these basic needs, once these basic needs are met, they are actually more capable of responding to mental health treatments and physical health treatments. And it's just removing that barrier so that they can actually make some improvements. And ultimately, this is kind of leveling the field so that that these individuals are able to just get these needs met for those ultimate outcomes. We are looking at this community approach as a network of providers. And that's what I'm really excited about, is really convening these resources and leveraging existing resources and growing those to really meet the needs of our community and really stabilize certain populations to be able to have more improved health outcomes.
So one of the things that will also help us do is, one of the things you've heard me talk about often in this room is that there are a lot of services we provide to individuals who are high risk that we can't bill for. Things like navigating, getting basic needs met. This actually will allow us also to have a way to bill for when we connect someone to a community-based organization that provides basic needs services. So that's another benefit for the organization. It just pays people for work that's being done on behalf of individuals. And it does expand what's available, and it has helped people improve health outcomes. So that's the ultimate goal.
Do we have any sense of how many people we might be able to serve with these resources, or, how many more people we might be able to connect with and provide basic services to?
We have the most recent numbers for Medicaid enrollment in Central Oregon is, I think, just under now 60-some thousand people. So that is in our Tri-County region. And what that means is those are either children or they are individuals whose income is such that they can't afford their own healthcare coverage. So that's every single person potentially could benefit from this service. Clearly, not every single person that's a Medicaid member needs basic healthcare barriers removed. Some of them are living in perfectly fine circumstances, just need the health benefit. But I think that's the best guess I can give you of the scale. I would say it's a fraction of that number. Yeah.
Okay, is there any questions or a motion? No.
No further questions. Move approval of chair signature of document number 2024-702, accepting a community capacity building grant from Pacific Source.
And I will second it. Any other discussion or comments? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And acting chair will vote yes also.
Thank you, commissioners. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, other items. I know Jen has fire letter. Yeah. Or yep, hazard map, yep. And yeah,
Kevin Moriarty here too.
I see Kevin here also.
I have just an updated letter from the one I emailed her. Very minor. Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. So you've been given a draft version of a letter addressing the draft Oregon statewide wildfire hazard map. And based off of the last two discussions during the board meetings over the last 2 weeks, it did sound like there was some interest in just really taking that original draft letter that we received and putting the county letterhead on there. So there's been very little, almost to none, no changes to this draft letter versus, from the one that Craig had originally submitted to you. So I'll just turn it over to you for discussion. And if you have any edits, questions, comments, thoughts, we're here to help.
Is this the right tone for us? I mean, I read it, I'm like, well, I still, we're a high wildfire county. We community development, we kind of know what to do. We've been doing Project Wildfire for 30 years or whatever it's been. So, still kind of hard for me to get grounded in what exactly do I want to say at a state level.
I mean, to your first question on tone, I would say, unlike some of the people we've heard feedback from, I think it would be great for us to express appreciation, for the efforts of the state, not just launch in and say, that your product sucks, but to say, we really appreciate what you're trying to do, in terms of, making our homes in the state of Oregon safer. And I do think that, kind of the specific critiques, I definitely agreed with I agreed with Craig Letz's kind of thought. It'd be better to just use the WUI map, but I also just for me the kind of key point or the essential point is that there's more high hazard in our community than they've mapped. And so I would like to explicitly say that we think that and that would be the reason I think to fall back to using the WUI map. We think that there's more high hazard than your model has indicated. So if it's problematic, then why not just use the WUI map instead?
One of the high level things that comes to mind for me is the fact that, we've been pushing best practices, which basically includes everything that may come in the future. And this is a tool so we can get regulatory for required best practices. I mean, that's kind of what I see as the big picture here. We know that defensible space and building style and up slopes and tree trimming, just all the basics are the thing to be doing. And we've done it as best practices, trying to just propagate that information out to anybody and everybody. But now it's like, okay, we've determined that you have to do this by requirement. So that's just the big picture as I see it.
But also,
But-
Senate Bill 360 technically made this a requirement a long time ago in defensible space, but it was a toothless, system. So, I mean, so we're not creating whole new regulatory requirements. We're actually trying to come up with something that is implementable, and enforceable.
Kevin, any thoughts?
Yeah, for the record, Kevin Moriarty, County Forester. I reviewed the draft that Craig had presented, and I think he has some really good points. He really brought forth a lot of the issues that we have with the map. I do agree that, this was put on the Oregon Department of Forestry and OSU to develop this map. So we should at least acknowledge those efforts as far as, they are trying to prioritize areas for treatments and defensible space throughout the state. And, those efforts should be acknowledged. I do think in our county, a WUI code would probably be a really common sense approach to addressing the wildfire risk we have here, because we are surrounded by wildland fire fuels, and even a lot of our cities are integrated with wildland fire fuels. But to incorporate that at a statewide level, I'm a little hesitant to say that would be a working, feasible option. I just don't know if applying a WUI code across the state would be feasible, especially areas in the Northwest that really haven't seen the type of fire that we see out here in Central Oregon. I would encourage you to look at the way California has set up their wildfire, their fire hazard severity map zones. That approach is a pretty sound approach in how they applied it. They differentiated wildland areas and non-wildland areas, and created, and also incorporated the Ember transport into those non-wildland areas as susceptible to wildfire risk. And they also didn't bring it to a tax level as well. So, there are other alternatives out there besides a tax lot level, approach, or, a blanket WUI code approach. And there are in between options as well.
So then I kind of get down to, I don't know that this is the right letter. I mean, it's lots of good information, and it's what, industry expert has put on paper, but I don't know that these are the words that I would put out. Deschutes County, as I say, we've studied it, and Deschutes County is a high wildfire hazard area, the whole darn thing. So, this is a legislative effort, good for them. But I just don't have I don't have any specific items that I feel like I need to say, hey, but you need to do it like this.
So on that point, I'll provide another alternative I think that you may be aware of. But AOC is meeting on August 26th from 1 to 3 p.m. in Salem, specifically to take county input on the state's wildfire hazard map. It's kind of the last opportunity going into September's legislative concepts process. And so Brendan Persinger is looking for input. There's been, I think, 10 plus counties who are going to participate in that. As of, I think, the end of last week, he didn't have any confirmed attendance from Deschutes County, but it is an opportunity for county commissioners, for Kevin, for anyone from staff to attend either virtually or in person in Salem on August 26th to provide specific county feedback and advocate for specific points too. So we could do a draft letter, You could participate in that. We could do both. We could do neither, you know, just options on the table there.
Well, I mean, I would just say that that conflicts with our regular Board of Commissioners meeting time. So if we're not planning on meeting, then, you know, I would consider participating online. I doubt I would make the effort to go in person because you know, we had a discussion about these maps at our AOC District 2 meeting.
Last year, yeah, September.
And you know, honestly, it was a joke. I mean, the kind of input that some of the commissioners from other counties provided was yeah, I'll just say it was a joke. And I don't really feel like AOC is a constructive, productive place to provide input on these maps through. I'd much rather us do something individually as a county that expresses our perspective, which, you know, the perspective that Commissioner DeBonne just articulated. You know, this is, we think that there is a lot of high hazard area in our county, and it's not reflected in these maps. I think this is an appropriate message.
So then I'm seeing a letter about 2 paragraphs that keep it real simple. I mean, because, you know, the legislature said, let's make a map, Department of Forestry, OSU, everybody's making a map. It just doesn't jive with my worldview and, you know, my experience in this thing. So go ahead and do your map, but, you know, the insurance industry, lot by lot, I mean, what do I tell a property owner that they should fight to be in a higher or lower or get engaged or not? And I've been telling folks, just do your defensible space and somebody's making a map. I mean, that's just kind of what I
mean, the important, I think we need to ask why these maps are being developed, what they are going to, what their effect is going to be.
It's
The effect is-
regulatory.
The effect is, well, the effect is going to be that hopefully that we have a whole lot of people whose homes are a whole lot safer from fire. And that is accomplished both through regulations, but also that the state has said that the areas that are identified as high hazard and in the WUI will be focal areas for deploying state resources to help people implement defensible space, implement wildfire resilient building practices. So, you know, people have been thinking that this is punitive, that this is going to drive up their insurance costs when, you know, we have, you know, every insurance person who, you know, insurance industry representative who I've spoken to has said, no, this is, we're not using these maps to determine people's premiums or coverage. We have our own models, we have our own claim and loss data. But you know,
Well, and
on
I
the
would
flip side,
conclude
on the
that-
flip side, you know, being identified as high hazard may actually provide the benefit of more resources from the state to accomplish defensible space and home hardening work. So that's almost the exact opposite conclusion. Because, you know, people have been looking at it as a disincentive, and I think we should frankly look at it as a potential incentive. And it is, you know, one of my big concerns with kind of the Swiss cheese of this map is we do know that one of the most likely things to light your house on fire is your neighbor's house, not the wildfire 3 miles away. But you know, house to house ignition is, you know, is the major mechanism of fire transfer in some of the really big disastrous fires we've seen recently. So having a whole area, whole neighborhoods identified as high hazard, and then making sure that everybody in that whole neighborhood is doing defensible space is a real benefit to everyone in that neighborhood. So it's, I mean, we need to think about this not just from an individualistic perspective of, you know, I did my work, that makes my house a little safer because you can do all the work you want on your house. And if your neighbor doesn't do anything, you're still in a really crappy position. So, that is one of the other potential benefits of identifying areas as high hazard is that you will get the work done by your neighbors that needs to be done to make you safer.
Yeah. All good logic, I mean. But I mean, I don't know. So what does the letter look like from the Board of Commissioners? Maybe there's not a lot of.
Well, I would, if at the highest level, I simply would like the letter to say, we think there's more high hazard than you've identified. We could get, these bullets.
Yeah, so let's, take that. So as I say, we did do the wildfire hazard map analysis here years ago now. And maybe just acknowledging that, referencing our previous work is a way to publish the position of Deschutes County. When we study maps, we conclude Deschutes County is a high hazard area, because it keeps it referencing the work we did plus the kind of the facts on the ground.
And I do think that the 3 bullets from Craig Letz's letters, those are really good. They're good points.
Would we want to say we support the points in this letter presented by them or just republish
Lift those 3 points and say, here's a couple of perspectives that were provided by, fuels and fire experts.
Okay, well, how about we reconfigure a letter along those 2 lines? 1 paragraph talking about the big picture history. We've always, as I say, we've always supported best practices. Well, since the 90s, we've supported best practices. We've done analysis, determined wildfire hazard map. If we were to do it on our own, we conclude that Deschutes County is a wildfire hazard county, however we want to write that, and pick up those 3 bullet points. And then see what the letter looks like.
Yeah. That would work for me. How long do we have to submit this?
That's a great question.
So if this is being submitted for the public comment period, it'd be the 18th of this month.
It is the 14th.
You said the 18th, Sunday.
Comment period. Yeah, for Friday. Well, yeah, I mean, let's route a letter see if we're common ground.
Is that producible in the next day or so?
Sure. So I'm out after today for the rest of the month. I will draft the letter based on the information that I hear today, and I'll route it with Kevin and Nick. And Nick, we already talked about this morning. Nick will take the lead on this, on trying to get it internally approved via BCC emails to each of the commissioners, in the next 48 to 72 hours, get a signature, and then Nick will dry point on getting that submitted for public comment if we have consensus. Does that work for everyone?
Say, if we're talking about Project Wildfire, our conclusion about wildfire hazard and those 3 bullet points, it may just fall together.
And we'll lead with a thank you for your work. Yes. Okay.
Each have a vision, and I think we downloaded that here, and
I feel pretty good that
you
2 are on the same page for some specific information in a short and sweet letter that also acknowledges the hard work that they've done. However, okay, great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Starts off like that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, do you have anything?
I do not.
So yeah, as I say, I mentioned earlier, I did attend the statewide interoperability executive council yesterday as the chair. And as I already mentioned a few times here, talking to the enterprise information officer, the state of Oregon, talking about cybersecurity for local governments. I'm making a connection there. And also, I guess the other substantive item is the medical examiner study bill that is being followed up on in preparation for next year. So I was able to talk with Major Alex Gardner, Oregon State Police. So he said, he wants to get together and really learn about it. There's been a proposed meeting set up for the end of the month now with our medical examiner's office and the district attorney, and Major Gardner said he'd attend. So, and he's kind of leading it across the state. Interesting. obviously, let's put a full facility in Central Oregon, $60 million. Well, it may not be funded, right? But other options, stuff like reimbursing mileage for transports for bodies. I mean, there's all kinds of things in this area that could help the system. And the system matters because when we have a something that needs to be investigated or toxicology, getting that turnaround is really important for everybody, the investigations, detectives, court cases, families, best information on what happened, when these things get complicated, when deaths are complicated. So that was a really good follow-up, and that was just because we were in the same meeting yesterday. I think that's all I have. Oh, well, so you had a meeting, insurance, something?
Few things to report back on. But if
Yeah, so as I say, Sunday night and Monday was a legislative tour update effort. Doug Riggs brought in a few folks. Regional Solutions, Javi was there, Representative Owens, Representative Levy, Vicky Breeze Iverson, Court Boyce was there, director from Oregon Emergency Management and Oregon DHS Emergency Management Response people. So that's military department and DHS. So a lot of folks, it was water was the one of the big items, Core 3, homeless, and then they did something up in Madras. I didn't catch what they were doing because they were going to something else up in Madras on that one. But it was good to have a set of legislators. Department of Forestry was there, BLM was there Sunday afternoon. So a lot of roundtable folks. So it was good to have a half a dozen legislators paying attention and getting engaged.
the focus was Core 3 or what?
Well, it was multiple. Well, water was a big one. So, as I say, Sunday afternoon, there was a water tour. Kate Fitzpatrick was there, Ed Fitch and Doug Riggs. So, their position is, Oregon Water Resources is doing this groundwater rulemaking, and they're still working on a legislative case for how can you say we have to do this and state land use says that we need to plan for growth, and the urban growth boundary expansion approvals are based on, access to water. So it's just kind of having that discussion with legislators.
So yeah, I'll start with last week. Last week on Thursday, I went to the irrigation district download lunch with the irrigation districts and just heard the focus of that session was on current storage conditions in the basin and monitored flows in rivers and creeks, because basically there are a lot of irrigation districts whose rights and water allocations are based on live flow. So there's this report, share that.
Sharing today.
And today, basically this year is better than last year. That's good news. There's some interesting things that have happened. When Central Oregon Irrigation District had one of their main canals shut down for over a week because of a lava tube collapse. Suddenly there's a massive amount of additional water available for other irrigation districts to pick up. And, it kind of, what I think is pretty interesting about that is it's an indication of how much water will be available when we get some more of these systems piped, so that we can free up a whole lot of water for other irrigation districts and for the river. So that was the irrigation district download. On Monday, I invited Senator Golden to come to the community. He was supposed to be at that other meeting that you mentioned, but he had a sudden funeral that he had to attend, so he couldn't be in Central Oregon this weekend. But he was still able to make our Monday afternoon meeting by Zoom. And my purpose in that meeting was just to connect the senator with representatives from the insurance industry locally who have been doing their darndest, but have been facing real struggles with getting people insurance coverage and getting them coverage at reasonable or affordable rates. And so there was a lot of really good dialogue around, what the state can be doing to help, help this situation. The insurance representatives, said what I've been saying. The wildfire hazard maps are not being used for insurance determination. The insurance companies have their own models, their own maps, and they have decades of claim and loss data. And what the really big thing that's driving them right now is taking it into shorts in 2020 from the Labor Day fires. So they're scrambling to make up for those losses. And basically they articulated to the senator, it's going to be really hard for the insurance industry to, provide, relief in terms of premiums in the next few years, even though they very much support the idea of, actually doing things, encouraging people to make their homes safer. So then, they were sort of kicking it back to the legislature, can you incentivize people to do this work with somebody else's money? And, to which the senator said, there probably isn't a lot of state funding to do that right now, to give people relief on their insurance premiums. But there may be opportunities to create funding to cost share with people or incentivize people to do the work, to do the defensible space around their homes. That's he is working on a bill that he's carried the last two sessions. It was Senate Bill 1511 last session, and the goal of that bill is to set up a neighborhood protection cooperatives, he's calling them. Basically, again, going to that idea that, in a neighborhood, you're only as safe as the weakest link. And if your neighbor hasn't done the work, then their house could very easily catch yours on fire. So the idea is that you would have entire neighborhoods that receive an assessment, get a plan, and then when all of the neighbors within that community have implemented that plan, then they get a certification. And that certification ideally would mean something to the insurance industry. Members, people from the insurance industry that attended this meeting were talking about incentives that they are already, that some insurers are already trying to offer of about 3%, a 3% discount. But, when they're trying to charge you, $5,000, 3% it's nice, but it's not that much money. That was kind of the results of that discussion. So there wasn't opposition to this bill and the idea, but there was just kind of a lot of shoulder shrugging about, how do you actually really incentivize people to do the work. So that was the meeting with Senator Golden. But I'll be watching that piece of legislation coming into the next year. Also, there was also some discussion about, could the Oregon Fair Plan be better? Could that be tinkered with to make a better program? Lastly, yesterday I went and when Commissioner DeBonne was not available, I attended the SLED board meeting.
Great.
And
there's alternate opportunities.
Yeah, they talked about a lot of talk about spec buildings, about the industrial park, and then one of the things that came up was certain people in La Pine City government and at SLED had been contacted by DHS about finding 15,000 square feet of building space in Lapine. And you know, the SLED was talking about it like it's a great opportunity. These are, high educational degree, high paying jobs, and what can we do to help, get this, get the right building space for DHS to land there. At which point I shared with them that we have been in some discussions with DHS about potentially building a county building a building and then renting the state space or leasing the state space and like we do here. And so people were very interested in that, and we had a little bit of discussion about what could SLED or the city do to help expedite that project. That's all I've got.
Okay. Anything else?
I'll just confirm that Christy and I coordinated on this very issue yesterday, and yeah, so that project is certainly moving forward.
Yeah. It's nice to hear from the city manager, from the SLED director, from the SLED board chair, how excited they were to potentially land that facility in Lapine. They were thinking about from the perspective of jobs. I said, and it's also a really great thing to be able to offer those services in your community at a local office. And then when we were talking about what the county was doing and kind of the musical chairs of county office space in Lapine, the idea came up that pulling behavioral health out of the current facilities with the sheriff's office conceivably opens up a space that you could look at for DMV, and people got even more excited about that. So it may be that this this arrangement with DHS and the county becomes like a real exciting opportunity.
Okay. So seeing nothing else, meeting adjourned.